Normally I would say to you it's time for Ask Dr. Doreen, but instead it's time for Ask Evelyn Kung. And we are welcoming with us right now Evelyn Kung, who's been sitting so patiently while I rattled all of that off. Thank you for doing that.
You're very welcome.
And we should let people know that you are the clinical director for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. You've been working in this field for how many years?
20-something.
20-something, yeah. I think that qualifies you as an expert in anybody's playbook. But we like to give the disclaimer at the start of the show that there is no expert in any field that could give individual specific advice in this format. So keep that in mind. When you guys write in your questions, anybody that we have here answering questions is going to be taking the information that you give and giving some general tips and some suggestions for things to try or to talk to an expert that has access to that individual, because you really need to spend some more time than we can do in this format.
Yes.
So keep that in mind. But having said that, thrilled that you're here this morning to answer questions, and thank you so much for filling in for Dr. Doreen.
You're very welcome.
Well, it's truly our big treat. I want to start with a question. Somebody wrote in over the week saying, huge problem with 14-year-old male ASD child has two major issues. One, will not sleep alone and wakes up almost daily after first cycle sleep of night, approximately 3 to 4 a.m. with loud verbal sounds. That is definitely a problem. He is considered nonverbal, attends day school for autism. If left alone after falling asleep, will get up and go into mother's bed, awakening her. Family is experiencing constant sleep disruption, which is impacting mother's work ability. She is the principal income earner with a high stress job. Numerous tactile interventions have been tried without success, and the doctor prescribed melatonin 10 milligrams. Problem is remaining asleep. Then the second problem, she goes on, 2, child has developed behavior of wetting himself soon after arriving at school, although being toileted before leaving home. Changes own clothes and returns to class, continues work, and does not repeat the behavior the whole day. School does not call any attention to this behavior. Behavior began 6 months ago at another more restrictive PS placement. Other parents experiencing this problem, they want to know. Okay, so should we tackle number 1 first?
Yes,
okay.
Number 1.
All right.
Okay, so first of all, this is a 14-year-old, and that one of the reasons why I actually talk to the younger ones, parents of younger children, and tell them let's work on getting them to sleep in their own bed from the beginning, is autism has routine. Kids like routine. And if you get the routine of sleeping with someone, they're going to want to keep it.
Yeah.
And breaking any habit that's been there for 14 years, it will take a while. There won't be any magic cure. And so I always recommend to the younger parents of younger kids, like, this is something you want to do early on because you don't want to make this a habit. Typical kids, family beds and all that are fine because at some point those kids want independence.
Yes.
And so they naturally will migrate out of the parent's bed. But these are kids who develop habits, kids with ASD, and therefore whatever habit you're establishing when they're young, it's probably going to stay around if no one changes it.
The longer you keep doing it, the harder and the longer time it's going to take to change it, so something to be mindful of.
Yeah, and that's all of us. Any bad habit or any habit we get into, it's really hard for all of us to change any habit. And it's the same thing for your kids. It's just that they have the additional component of liking the routine and not wanting change or transition.
Okay, but if you haven't done that and you find yourself with a 14-year-old...
Okay, so for this child, the problem is that he has trouble remaining asleep.
Yeah.
So the first place I would look is that the doctor has prescribed melatonin. There's something called a melatonin wake, and it usually happens after 3 or 4 hours. And so what happens is when your body uses up all of the melatonin, you are wide awake.
Wow.
And that's why a lot of people actually hate melatonin.
Okay.
Because it is something that it's a documented thing that happens. And you are wide awake. It's the thing that helps you sleep and helps your body go to sleep. So the minute there's no more in your system, you are more awake than anything. It's like if it's morning.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean that you're not going to feel tired. It's just that you're wide awake for the day. And when that's happening at 3 or 4 a.m., it's a horrible time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's one thing. And so there are other supplements out there that combine melatonin with other types of supplements that help keep the kids asleep and, the slow release and all of that. And that actually has changed for a lot of the kids.
I know that Dr. Granpeesheh has one that she particularly loves, and she talks about it extensively on the show, Tranquil Sleep.
Yes.
She has brought it up before. We're not recommending any products at all, and we need to be clear about that. But it is one that she has mentioned before on the show that it is very reputable, and again, not a recommendation at all.
Well, we know about it because other parents have told us about it.
Yes.
That's how we know. And just with everybody and their sleep deprivation issues, we've had many people try. It's really hard to function. You can't think when you are sleep deprived.
Well, and so the kiddo is going to have more trouble, but then for everyone in the household.
Yes.
And I'm of course I'm really feeling for this mom who has got to keep a roof over the head and, getting woke. 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake me up, and I'm not going to be a nice person for that day and the next day.
And
I'm just
the thing is,
say.
there's a long-term effect for the child and for the mom.
Yeah.
And I know this because I've talked to a lot of neurologists with, a kid is not ready to learn if he's getting up at 3 or 4.
No.
If you are bringing him to school, he's not feeling good. I mean, one of the things that we always talk about is the kids need to sleep well and eat well, then they're ready to learn.
Yeah.
Then you can put them in school or any kind of learning situation, ABA, they will fully get everything they need from it. But as long as they're sleep deprived, it will be hard to concentrate, just like you and me.
Yeah.
And the long-term difficulty for the mom, especially, is because I have a parent right now who works at night, and so she tries to take care of the kids in the day, and then she works at night. So a lot of times she's only sleeping between 9 and midnight, because then she goes in at 1 a.m. And the neurologist actually pulled her aside and said, your memory will go.
Yeah.
You will start to lose your memory very quickly if you stay sleep deprived.
Yeah.
And so she's seen it and herself experiencing. And so we always work to try to figure out a way to help her get a night's sleep.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things. So for this child, definitely look at the melatonin, but also, if he's not getting sleep, he's not ready to go in. If he is waking up at the same time, he's a teenager too, so that means he's going through puberty. We always actually recommend 24-hour EKG for a lot of these kids, because there is some kind of correlation, I've been told by neurologists, between like spurts of hormone and seizure activity among individuals. And I've seen it in my kids, especially at preteen. Like they'll come in and be perfectly fine, and then suddenly as they hit the preteen years and they're starting to go through puberty, there seem to be like a whole subset that do get seizures. And then I finally had a neurologist tell me that I was right.
Yeah.
That it is something that happens.
And from what I've heard with seizures, it can be possible that it's happening with your child and it's not visible to you because it's happening at such a level in the brain. It's a teeny tiny seizure, but it can disrupt things, and you're only going to be able to see it if you take them and do that EKG.
Yeah. And you want the 24-hour one, because the one that's only that short one, it has to happen during that time. And since this is during sleep, that is an issue.
Okay.
So that is something else to look at.
So something to check, to rule out, may not be, but if it is that, then it's going to open up a whole new door of how you treat this.
Definitely.
Okay.
So those are just general recommendations for now. And the other thing that's helped a lot of our kids is we've actually looked at what they're eating. And seeing if there's a correlation. Like I had a child who basically, when he drinks any or eats any dairy, within 6 hours of bedtime, he would wake up at exact 2 or 3 in the morning. And we removed the dairy from 6 p.m. before he could have dairy, but before 6 p.m. And then he slept through the night.
Okay.
These are strange things. So there are some food correlations. So if you want to do a food diary with what time he's waking up and what he's eating, some of our parents have been really successful in finding some correlations in different types of foods. But
definitely not a thing to just let it ride. Something has to change.
No, and the thing is, if you're going to train him to sleep alone, it's going to be a slow process. This is where you need a behavior analyst to come in and just slowly shape moving from the parent's bed to the child's own bed. And it is something to work on, where you start one and then you slowly, move him over, or trying to reinforce keeping him there. But I have to warn you that you are sleep deprived now, and if you're going to work on sleep, it means that you are going to be more sleep deprived, because you have to be awake enough to follow through with whatever intervention.
To me means you've got to have reinforcements. There's no way you're going to do this on your own.
Oh, no, definitely. And I actually tell parents it's not a way to spend vacation, but it's actually a good way for the long run to spend vacation, is is know that this is a time where you're going to work on this and know that you're going to be more sleep deprived, and then bring in reinforcements, people that will help you stay up, who will follow through, and who will really like stay with the routine, so that you're showing this child, this is where you're supposed to sleep, this is how it works. So there is a way to do it, but I recommend that you get some help.
And imagine, you might be feeling like, oh no, well, we started the conversation with saying, try to do this earlier than 14.
Yes.
But now the child's, this is a teenager that's 14. You want to do this now as opposed to when they're 18 or 20.
Oh, most definitely.
Now is the moment to get this, when would now be a good time? Now.
Or wait till the next school break.
Okay.
Or I do a lot of like major interventions during school and winter break.
Yeah, well, it makes sense.
Because then you're not disrupting school.
Yes.
So that makes a difference.
All right. And then for the second part of this, the wetting himself right after he gets to school.
Okay, so what I keyed in on this one is that the behavior began 6 months ago at a more restrictive public school placement. Mm-hmm. And my guess would be if it was more restrictive, there was probably some escape mechanism to this, or avoidance of wanting to go into that classroom. And then at some point it turned into a routine.
Yeah.
Like, this is just what I'm supposed to do when I go in. So really getting someone outside to do a functional assessment would be good. But in the meanwhile, like you're saying, that he is fine when he leaves home, but the minute he goes to school soon after arriving, I would actually probably take him straight to the bathroom when you arrive, and have him go then, to make sure that you're limiting the possibility. Right. But I also would restrict liquids. Yeah. Because I would see, like, a lot of parents actually have a really good idea. They know that if they drink 1 cup of water, the child has to go in an hour. Right. So if you have that kind of idea, if you don't have that kind of idea, try to figure out some correlation. Yeah,
watch it over the weekend to see.
Yeah, and then just be able to see, like, okay, he drank this much at breakfast, and then you try to have it earlier so that he has less of a reason to go. Yeah. But,
I got to be honest that if every day, I used to be a school teacher, and it's hectic in the morning. And there was one year when I had my first period was like my free period, because every teacher gets a prep period. Oh my gosh. Like, it spoiled me for every other year teaching, because to come in and have that whole hectic thing and then get a break was fabulous for me. And then every time that I had any other schedule, I kind of hated it and resented it. I was like, I really miss that break first thing in the morning. And so, there's a part of me that you were saying escape, he's taking care of it completely for himself. What a lovely little quiet break that you get to go to the bathroom, completely change your clothes, and then come in after all the hubbub has died down.
No, we have a lot of kids who that's what they do.
Yeah.
Even the older kids, even the kids that have a ton of skills and could easily ask to go to the bathroom, a lot of them in between classes will ask to go to use the bathroom at the beginning and the end of classes, because they just need that 5-minute break of just being calm and in full control and gathering their thoughts, and it's just comforting.
So they should have somebody at the school do an FBA to make sure and see what's really driving the behavior. But if, for instance, if it's mostly escape, as you were saying, taking them to the bathroom immediately, but then there has to be some bigger reward, like a break or something, for not having soiled themselves.
Yeah, and the thing is, it could just be that you take them there and they come out and get a downtime. Yeah. And just doing something fun away from all the hubbub of the morning activity. And it could just be, a lot of times we'll have them go to like the nurse's office. Yeah. And then they can just sit in the nurse's office for 5 or 10 minutes, just to where it's really calm. Yes. And that's the reinforcer. Yes. But yeah, you could also provide, and I'm a strong believer in school-based reinforcement. Mm-hmm. So whatever environment you're in, I want them to find something enjoyable in that environment. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we have to create what that is. So maybe it's just like a book or a video or an iPad where he only has access to it at that time and nowhere else. Not other times of the school day, not at home, nowhere else. But just knowing, like, hey, I get this reward, whatever it may be here.
And I can hear parents who are like, but then he's going to take 10 minutes off at the beginning of every single, day, and we're going to lose all that instruction. And I just want to remind people that when you do an intervention like that, you can gradually wean them, little itty bitty bit at a time. So maybe if it starts out being a 10-minute break, then it becomes a 9.5-minute break. break, then it becomes a 9-minute break, then it becomes an 8.5-minute break. And after, say, a month and a half, they don't need the break anymore. They just go to the bathroom. And you go, okay, I missed 10 minutes of class for a month and a half, but he's already missing 20 minutes with a behavior and soiling himself.
Well, and the thing is, in reality, if going to any classroom, the first 10 to 15 minutes of beginning and end of classes are really nothing. No, there's no instruction.
Yeah. A lot of times it's a warm-up or
it's just
dealing with behavior.
Period.
And
it's just a transition period. So a lot of times they just miss that transition where there's not instruction going on.
Yeah. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Let us know. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to be back with more of your questions. Stick with us.
Hi guys, welcome back to Smarty. This month we're going to be creating a popsicle puzzle. As we do this fun activity, you'll notice these icons will pop up. These icons tell you important information about the skills we're using to create the craft and where you can find them on the Skills program. Skills is an ABA-based tool that helps parents create a curriculum that will help their children that are on the autism spectrum. Well, let's get started. The materials you'll be needing are popsicle sticks, tape, and arts and crafts materials. So step one, you're going to take your popsicle sticks and lay them down and cover them with tape so they don't move around. Now that my popsicle sticks have been secured with tape, here comes the fun part. You're going to take your arts and crafts materials, they can be paint, markers, whatever you have, and then you're going to decorate this with a beautiful picture. This is the beautiful picture that I made. Now what I'm going to do is remove the tape. And now, as you can see, they come apart. And here is your awesome puzzle. Now, the fun part is trying to assemble the picture that you just made now that it's all been separated. I hope you enjoyed this activity with me. Until next time, guys, craft on! To find more about Skills and to access all of the lessons you saw in today's Smarty, visit skillsforautism.com and click on the parents icon. Skills, the online autism solution.
Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Evelyn Kung. She's here today filling in for the wonderful Dr. Grampuchet. She's filling in for Dr. Grampuchet, but it's kind of you're filling in for Ask Dr. Grampuchet, kind of. And so it's wonderful that she's here and she's answering your questions. As we said earlier in the show, she's the clinical director for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders and been working in this field for 20 some odd years. So plenty of expertise there. I want to go to this question. My 11-year-old is on the spectrum and he has 2 sisters, ages 8 and 9. I feel like the only way he knows how to interact with them is to be annoying, running in their rooms and bothering them, then starts the endless he said, she said tattling. It's driving me crazy. How do I teach him to interact nicely with them? He attends a regular ed middle school and does well academically, but is very immature, and thank you.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that goes, this is that age range. And, you know, when you see like silly movies, like Something About Mary and things like that, and the word that they always use with movies like that is they say it's sophomoric humor. Yes. Because it's sophomores, you know, and younger. It's that, you know, there is a part of me that loves boys in this age range, but they're in the age range where you say certain words and they dissolve into giggles and everything is off color and they laugh at the most ridiculous, silly things. So part of me wants to congratulate this mom because it seems kind of neurotypical boy to me, but I don't know if my view of it is skewed. So what do you think?
Okay. So congratulations to the mom for identifying this, because it is probably the way he gets the most attention from the girls.
Okay.
8 and 9-year-old girls are the beginning of being like cliquey, where I always tell my patients that have sons,
yes,
it's good that they're not a girl, because with girls talk more, and a lot of their activity is based on who's friends with who. And trying to explain that to an ASD girl is always so hard, saying like today she's your friend because she decided to, and tomorrow she may not be, and it's okay. And just explaining that type of interaction that happens between friends and girls at 9 years old is very common. And so for this child, it probably is a mixture of what you've said. Part of it is just that silly behavior, and if he has that understanding and just be, just kind of silly and just goofing off. But a part of it is he probably wants to interact with his siblings, especially if they're sharing a room, and the two of them are in one room and he's in another, and he probably doesn't know how to get in there. And a lot of what they're talking about is probably something that he doesn't understand, even if they let him in. So but he knows that if he goes and bothers them in whatever way, they will probably respond in the same way. Get mad at him, tell him to leave, yell for mom, whatever it may be.
But that's attention.
And that's attention, and that's probably somewhat routine attention. So it becomes comforting for him. It's negative attention, but there's some aspect of the routine where the kids are like, I know what to expect.
Yeah.
If I go in and do this to them, they for sure will start to yell or tell me to leave or whatever it is. And that's just the way it is. So a lot of times in these situations, I actually sit the girls down and I talk to them and I just say, hey, I know when your brother comes in, this is, it bothers you and everything, but we need to figure out a way for him to spend time with you where you're not yelling at him or you're not doing those things. And a lot of times the siblings are really good and they will have that kind of time. It's just that it's not during that time, period. But there are also siblings who really grow to hate their sibling with ASD. And I feel so bad for that. And I actually spend a lot of time with siblings trying to get them to understand, it's nothing about you, it's how he understands the world.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't know what to say to you, or maybe he knows that he can go ask you a question, but your response is something he doesn't understand because of the language part and communication part, he's not going to want to ask you because he can't predict or he can't understand what you're saying. The comprehension is very minimal. So that becomes an issue too. So I actually will sit the girls down and talk about what really bothers them, how much this child actually understands. Even though he's older than them, he will understand less than them. And just try to create situations that they can actually interact positively together. And I talk to the girls and I get their opinions about when they would like that to happen. For some girls, if they get some choice in it, or siblings, if they get some choice in how they're working through it, they will totally work through it. They will do it. If not, just for the parents. Yeah. So I would actually sit there and say, okay, when can we do this? But then it might remain a problem at night. Maybe the girls are doing homework or something and they can't. Then I would actually establish some short activity, whether they're having a snack together or something to where they're getting some positive interaction. Because they need, a lot of times we'll be teaching a game to the 11-year-old and I actually ask the parents, what do kids in your family like to do? Or I ask the parents, what did you do before you had kids? Yeah. Because I want to teach this child something that's going to integrate into the family. Yeah. Not always having the family integrate into the child's interest.
Love it.
And so it works with everything. I have families who say, I'm so tired of Disney tunes. Right. And I say, okay, so then what kind of music did you listen to, or do you listen to outside? Or before you had kids, and then they say, and I said, so start playing that, because the kids like the music because of the routine of it. Yeah. Not because, they will have preferences in terms of types of music, but if they start to hear it just as much as they hear that Disney, it'll grow on them, and that becomes more of a habit and ritual and routine, and then they start acclimating. And it gets really crazy because music actually is one of the ones that really integrates the kids into the family. I have kids at all level of functioning where we can get the kids into the siblings' music, get them into the parents' music, where they like to listen, or they dance around, or they've even gone to concerts. So it's really, music is one of those things that really works in terms of interaction, because it's something that's already natural for the siblings and for the family.
Yeah, love that.
So it's just trying to figure out what other activities that the family is engaging in that we can teach the child how to be a part of. And it's counterintuitive, because I know so many of our families just want to make our kids happy, the ASD kids, so they want to do what that kid wants. But I always say they're going to grow up anyway, and we need to get them into your family. And as long as they start integrating activities into the family's choice and what they do, they're going to remain a part of a more integrated family. So, I mean, so this is negative attention and they're getting a lot from it, but you just have to find another activity that they can do where he's getting positive attention, and then trying to figure out when this occurs mostly, and then teaching the siblings how to understand and how to talk at a level that he understands. So let's say he asks a question, they're not gonna they just kind of bring their language down so that he really understands, and making sure that he's understanding what they're saying.
And I kind of want to go back in a way. This relates back to me with the mom from the first question about being so tired, is if you're already at the point where this behavior is driving you crazy, that before you institute these things, either mom has to have a little bit of a break or she's got to have reinforcements. Because if you go to institute, okay, we're going to do an activity together, and you're sick and tired of them, you're not going to be your best self to do it.
No, definitely.
So, we really have to be careful as parents to pick and choose when we're ready to do something and ask for help, so that it's going to take a little bit of time and effort on your part. It's going to be so worth it. It's going to be so worth it. But you have to be ready to put that time and effort in before you even start.
Well, I think that's general for anything you're teaching.
Yeah.
Anything you're teaching. I always tell the families, if you're too tired to ask your child to clean up, don't ask them. Just do it yourself, because it's a lot easier for you to just clean up than to make the request and not follow through, or to follow through and know it's going to take 2 hours to follow through. And and as parents, you don't have that kind of energy to spare. So plan it. Know when you're going to give instructions that you really will follow through. And if you can't follow through, don't give the instruction.
It's that old thing about don't start something you're not prepared to finish, right? Mm-hmm. Is today a yes day of yes, I can follow through on that. And if I can't, then don't even bring it up. Yeah,
and actually for kids that are really high functioning, that have are academically on par, but it's other social issues, I actually manipulate situations to me. So I actually start telling them okay, I'm tired today. What does that mean? What does that mean I'm going to do?
Right.
Like start to learn mom.
Right.
And I start pointing it out and actually describing what will probably happen depending on my mood.
Right.
And the kids get it. They're like, oh yeah, this is not a date.
Okay. What a great thing to think about is that we can communicate those things to our kids.
You just have to simplify it and make it in very concrete terms that they understand. And they start to read mom and dad pretty well.
Yeah. Which is a great thing. Adds to quality of life. We had a question that just came in, and it is from what we fondly refer to as our West Virginia mom. So I have a little bit of background on this mom. But she says, I have a question about my son. Excuse me, he will, and everything just went away in that moment. And I totally lost the question. So we're going to take a break, figure out what happened with my iPad. Don't go away, West Virginia mom, and we'll get it back. Stick with us.
Logan Shepard. At first glance, he looks like a typical American teenager. He plays in a band, loves hanging out with his friends, he doesn't like doing homework, and he's not really fond of broccoli. But Logan Shepard is not your typical 14-year-old. Logan was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. He was nonverbal, made no eye contact, and his parents were told to abandon all hope. Instead, his parents began an intensive intervention treatment. At its center was a quality ABA program known as the CARD method. This is Logan Shepard now.
All I really want to say is I'm kind of copying Martin Luther King. I kind of have a dream that one day I can just inspire people to never give up, because that's what I want to do in life. Because if I can succeed, they can succeed, and I will succeed.
To follow Logan's musical journey, visit www.facebook.com/officialdrummerrock or @drummerrock on Instagram. For more information on the CARD method, visit www.centerforautism.com or call 800-345-CARD. Rock on, Logan.
Well, we just had a technical glitch, and my iPad is rebooting. But while it reboots, we wanted to come back and do another question. And this kind of goes in hand with what I was saying before. I have a 4-year-old. How can I tell the difference between a 4-year-old just being a 4-year-old who is upset and not getting his way, and what can be contributed to his autism? He was diagnosed moderate.
Yes. So this is my answer to everybody is you need to know what a typical 4-year-old does.
Okay.
Okay. So the difference, though, is the communication ability. So with a typical 4-year-old, they can be having their own non-compliant tantrum kind of issues, but they understand the reasoning behind things, and they understand the cause and effect component. So even if they are crying or tantruming and you tell them you're not going to do something or you will do something and these are the consequences, they get it and they're making that choice to do it. A lot of times when kids with ASD are diagnosed and they have these tantrums and compliance, you don't have that language ability to see what the reasoning is. And a lot of times the more you try to reason with the child, the more they get upset, because now there's all this additional language that they don't understand.
Okay.
And it becomes a bigger issue. So in terms of rate, all the funding agencies want to know, is he tantruming 2 times a day or non-compliant 5 times a day? We have a really specific criteria for what that non-compliant or tantrum is. A lot of times our kids will tantrum at a more intense level than a typical child or it might be the same intensity for every interaction as opposed to for a typical child. If they're not getting their way or if you're changing your mind about something, it's the exact same thing as if they're getting hurt. And that intensity shouldn't be the same, but it goes into the executive function aspect of understanding what's important and what's not important.
Well, this really, now that the iPad is working again, I'm gonna flip to the other question because it goes along with this. Our West Virginia mom said, I have a question about my son. He will be 4 in December, verbal, but speech is difficult to understand. How do I teach him self-regulation skills, and which ones do I teach? A simple tantrum turns into a massive meltdown that lasts well over an hour and sometimes more. He continually shuts down and you can't touch him, speak to him, etc., without escalating the situation. It is becoming a big problem and makes it difficult to leave the house. The tantrum usually starts out as he was disciplined or told no, and has a typical 3-year-old fit, yay for milestones, and then he can't calm down. Any help is greatly appreciated. So it does feed right into this, because you were talking about, well, we have to understand what's typical and what isn't typical. And this is about to be 3 and this one is 4. So since you're talking about this anyway, I just thought I'd piggyback that on. So
sometimes with the kids who actually talk but they're not clear, it's actually worse for them, because frustration is so difficult for them, because they're saying everything and they're communicating, at least to them, it's clear, but to the person listening to them, it's not clear.
Yeah.
And if they're asked to repeat or say it again, it's even just think about when you're aggravated, how often would you be able to comply if every time that you spoke, somebody would ask you to say it again or repeat yourself? It just becomes a really frustrating element of life.
I compare it to our teenagers with the headphones. Last night in the car, I said something to Jem, and I said, are you listening? Because I always say that now, because the headphones is like, yep, I'm listening. And I said, okay, so do you want to do this or do you want to do that? And he was like, wait, what? And then I repeated it again. And then he said something that had nothing to do with what I was talking about. And he goes, well, I don't really understand. Tell me again. And I was so frustrated, because it was like, how many times do I need, take the headphones off and actually listen to what I'm saying? So, but for a kid who's trying to communicate and they feel like they put in the energy, that was the same thing with me. I put in the energy, now respond. And when you don't get the response, it's just so exhausting.
And if your whole life is that way, it's constant, it's so frustrating overall.
Yes.
I mean, it completely is extremely frustrating. So I think that in itself is one thing, So if there's a way to work on clarity, I mean, I'm sure you're already working on articulation and all of that to make things more clear. But this is a situation, depending on where you're at, where I would use some kind of visual icon. So it's not like you're going to go nonverbal because he's not talking. But when he's really upset, there's usually a few things that he wants where I would actually create some kind of icon. It's like, I need a break, I want out of here, or whatever. That I would create some kind of board for him to use. Like, if you're too tired to talk right now, just tell me what you need.
Okay.
And he can just point to it, and then you don't get to that point where he's losing it.
Okay.
You know, because especially as like that day goes on and they get more tired, it becomes they just don't have the patience for it anymore. And at the beginning, it might be okay. But also with autism, there is that self-regulation feature. It's an executive functioning issue. I always tell families that whenever they come in and say, we need some emotional control, and these are the kids who like cry at a drop of a hat, laugh at it. I mean, they're the most loving kids. That's the thing is, usually the kids that have emotional regulation issues are also the most loving kids. Because when they feel with all of themselves.
Yeah.
So they come in and they're like, oh, I love you and you're the best thing in the world. But then when they're crying at that level too.
Yeah.
And I always tell families, give me a few years to work on this because I can't do it, and it's not like a regular behavior.
Right.
So what I do is I work on a lot of antecedent manipulations where I don't get them to that point where they're really upset.
Yeah.
I try to do things ahead of time to come. And sometimes it's functional communication, like what I was saying. Like, here's the board. If you can't talk right now, just point and tell me what you want, and I'm not going to question you about it. I'm going to just give you whatever it is you're asking for. Sometimes it's teaching routines, so that if you say no, you won't answer again until like a certain timer goes off or a visual timer happens, so that he just knows that this is, she said no, and if I keep going, I'm still not going to get it. But if I wait this amount of time, I will get another response. Like, there's just other things that you can do ahead of time so that they don't get to that point of being completely exasperated and then crying for a long duration. But there's a lot of like behavior interventions that are antecedents. So changing things before they happen so that you don't get to the point where they're so upset. Of course, it's still going to happen, like a typical 3-year-old. Sometimes they just want to cry. And it's okay. And just knowing that, okay, if you cry, I'm still not going to give you your way, but hey, you can come in here, do it this way, and I'm just not going to pay attention to you during this time, but although I will come and check on you.
Yeah.
To make sure you're safe and everything. But it's a lot of times with the kids, you want to do things before they get to the point. And that's where you need the behavior analyst to go in and try to figure out what those antecedents are.
Yeah.
What can you do? What alternatives can you provide without giving in to the meltdown? But so many times these kids, they just, if they're vocal, I actually start telling them, like, I teach them when they're not in the middle of their meltdown, I actually teach them phrases that will help communicate what the meltdown is.
Yeah.
And it's important to do it not during a situation.
Yes.
There are some behavior analysts actually who will go in and say, like, he should be saying, like, I need a break, in the middle of a crying thing, and try to get that from him. But I can't make a child say anything.
Right.
So I always want, and the thing is, if you just look at me and you, if we're really upset, we're not learning anything.
Right.
So I always say, like, hey, outside of the emotional moment, we're going to talk about this, or outside of the emotional moment, I'm going to teach you these phrases that I need you to know how to say.
Yeah.
So that when you start crying, I can prompt you and say, like, you can say this if you need whatever it is that you need. And a lot of times the kids will be like, oh, and then they'll just say it, and then you already have an established consequence for when they say it. So that just understanding that this is what will come is also, I think, very comforting to the kids, very rewarding, because they don't want to cry either, because it's exhausting to cry for an hour or however long to have that tantrum. So it's a lot of teaching ahead of time. You're not going to avoid them, because a normal 3-year-old will have those kind of 3-year-old tantrums, but you will try to avoid it or teach them other skills that will help you alter their behavior so that they're not getting to that point very often.
And then for meltdowns, one of the amazing things that I've learned on this journey is that sometimes with the meltdowns, there's other stuff going on too. That one of the things that you guys made me do was take data on what was happening, and I couldn't see any point to it. The one example that I always talk about on the show is that there was a particular grocery store that we would go into all the time, and Jem liked to look at the octopus. There was always an octopus in their case, and it was like, go into the store, and he was always so happy, let's go look at the octopus. And then everything was fine, and we would round the corner and go by the dairy, and he would have the mother of all meltdowns. The mother of all meltdowns. And you guys asked me 1,000,008 questions, and I, took as much data, but I was like, there is no pattern. There is no pattern except for the thing that we turn and you guys were adamant. They're like, something's going on in that moment. And it took a therapist coming with me, because what it was the floor changed. It went from a slick floor to a grid floor. And he was having problems on other grid floors as well that I hadn't picked up on, that every time we would leave Disneyland, he would have a meltdown. And I didn't know that because in Disneyland, when you go through the parking garage and when you walk on the side of the parking garage, it's a grid, and he would have a meltdown as we got off the escalator, because he always visually thought that he was going to fall between the grid.
So that's a visual, yeah, that's definitely. I had kids, and this is where you have a typical kid who can tell you this information.
Yeah, but he couldn't
tell you
No.
this was going to happen. I had my friend's child, we went for a walk, and we were at the University of Michigan, and he was 4, and they would say that he would have these sudden meltdowns, and what we realized is all the shadows.
Yeah.
He thought they were holes. And that's actually a developmental vision issue.
Yeah.
And so but he couldn't say it, and then I actually taught him while I was with him, because I just said, it's okay, see, touch with your foot. Like I taught him like a blind
Exactly.
person to like touch and be like, you're not going to fall. It's just a shadow. And it was really funny, because then on the whole trip as we were walking through, he would do that, and he'd look at me and say, shadow? And I
Yeah.
was like, yep, it's a shadow. And we would just go through.
Yeah, and you guys did that for Jem, and the tantrums went away. But when it's a meltdown, sometimes there's something else going on too. And I really think that, it's important to take data so that you can see patterns, but when you can get another pair of eyes to be looking at it too, because sometimes you can't see what's happening. You just don't.
I mean, this is where our kids, their communication ability really lacks, because a typical child will tell you what they're afraid of, or will describe to you what they're starting to feel, because a lot of times they're sick too.
Yeah.
You're like, they're crying more than normal, and then the next night you're like, oh, look, they have a fever now. This
Yeah.
must have been happening yesterday.
Yes.
So like, I'm a firm believer of like, let's teach your child physical states, the basics.
Yes.
And even if they don't have a lot of language, or a lot of times they have language, but they can't use it when they're feeling bad. I mean, I have a child who doesn't use any language and will just point. I will just say, what hurts? And he knows now. He'll point to the area of his body, and he'll say, ow.
Yeah.
Ow, because we taught him how to do
Yes.
that when we knew that he was sick.
Yes.
So like when we knew he had a sore throat, we would just have him point and say ow, and I would do 1,000 trials when he was sick, because you had to capture it when it's happening.
Yes.
You can't use it any other time.
Right.
If it's not occurring physically. So whenever they're cold, hot, I would just I immediately would just give 1,000 trials so that they could actually tell me. But the thing is, the parents always said, that was such a comfort, because
Yes.
now when anything hurts, he just points and he says ow to whatever body part it is, and they know.
And you can prevent the meltdowns and then get to giving them help and support for the thing that they want, which is, there's a dignity in that they're owed. They need to be able to have that. Okay, so let us know how that goes. Try those things out. I want to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back with one more short segment for talking with Ask Evelyn Kung. Stick with us. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're at the ABCs and XYZs of Special Needs Conference. And this year, for the first time, they've got something really remarkable. It's the Entrepreneurial Boutique. These are all items that have been made and are being sold by individuals who have special needs. So we're going to do a little shopping and talk to some of these fabulous entrepreneurs. Come on.
My name is Molly Rarick, and I'm founder of Breed's Gift. We're a nonprofit that serves teens and adults with special needs, like Chase here. We were founded in 2013 and serve people in the Conejo Valley, Santa Barbara, and LA.
Our main objective is to give our participants the skills they need to gain a more independent life.
My name is Shelley Cox, and Lisa Zalagi and I are founders of Creative Steps and Create Micro Business Enterprises. And the items that we're selling here today are all made by the clients who have passions about what they want to make, and then they get the profits from what they make after we've paid all of the other expenses.
We are here today because My goal is to be independent, and also I would like to share all my artwork, and I would like to sell.
Thinking about at his young age being a businessman, it's amazing. I cannot be more proud.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're here with Evelyn Kung, who is the clinical director for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and she's answering your questions. We're calling it Ask Evelyn Kung. She's here filling in for Dr. Granpeesheh, who will be back next week. So those of you keeping track, you can see her next week. I've been dying to ask you this question that somebody wrote in. For college, is it better to disclose during the application process?
Okay. So this is where every university is different from my experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning things all the time, but there are some schools where you have to apply the normal way,
Mm-hmm.
and then there is the disabilities office or learning resources offices, whatever they call it, and there you have to let them know if you want special consideration or needs. There are some where you apply and then you get redirected, and then there are some where you're doing it at the same time.
Okay.
So
how would you find out?
You actually can find out if you go. Like I always say ahead of time, go and just talk to the offices.
Okay.
And they're really honest with you. Most of the ones that I've spoken to, they're very honest, and you don't do it the year you're applying. Do it like
Okay.
a few years before.
Okay.
You want to do it early because there are schools that are known for being really welcoming to the situation.
Yes.
And I've learned about a bunch of programs recently. I have a kid that's, on that age range. And while I'm there with her, I'm actually asking 1,000 other questions for our
Yes.
kids here.
Yeah.
And so there are some offices that are just really clear, like they want to help you, they don't discriminate at all. They are very open to helping, like they want to help the child that has that disability really be successful. There are harder ones where they don't want to know anything about it.
Right.
And those are the ones I probably wouldn't disclose. Because unless there's a whole university system where I had a friend who was an admissions director, and she basically said, in your application, you have to show that you've overcome something. That if you've overcome, it can be anything, it shows that you have some kind of perseverance to
Right.
stay involved.
Because college takes tenacity. It really does.
It does. And especially if you go to a larger public university, you're a number.
Yes.
No matter what. So there's a lot of universities who you might want to disclose a part of it,
Right.
to show that you've overcome a lot and your child's been able to do so much even though they don't understand. And they might have an idea that your child might have a disability, but you're not coming straight out and telling them.
Okay.
And then there are the more competitive the university, that's probably the way to go. They usually will tell you no, you have to do the application process first, and then after that we'll handle things.
Yes.
But there are a lot of universities who will just tell you from the beginning, go to both places, tell us
Okay.
who your child is, we'll help you through it, and we'll help you through the process.
Okay.
But it really is. It varies depending on the university and where you're trying to go and what you're trying to do. And in many ways, it is like the public school process is you want to show your child at their best.
Yes.
And not talk about the weaknesses so much because they don't want the responsibility.
Right.
So
It's even a different ballgame in college in terms of that they don't have a legal responsibility to change things for your child.
And you can tell if there is student support services, what do they have available already?
Right.
Because if they don't really have a formal office, they don't know what to do with you.
Right.
They won't know what to do. And that'll be harder. But if they have actually a student support office where they're looking at, if you have a disability or anything like that, then they're more likely to be more accepting of disclosing early on.
But there are more and more colleges that have autism programs.
There are.
That have living situations. So, I've been talking about this more and more. We've started something here on the show called Autism in the Classroom, and we've got a big event that's going to be happening at the beginning of the year. Because we just see that this is an area that we need to have more light shed on it and more information spread to people who want it. And as part of that, we've been trying to make sure that we have information for people of all age range and all abilities. And it's been very exciting for me to see how much of a college experience is available and not just for people who are wildly high functioning. So I'm happy that we're going to be sharing more information about that and seeing. I can remember when we started Autism Live looking for college situations and seeing just a teeny tiny handful. And now it's like, well, which are the best 10?
Well, it's really
Which are the best 10?
No, Peterson's guide has one just for if you have disabilities. That's how widespread it is now. I was in Barnes & Noble, and I saw one last year. And I like opened it because I was like, okay, what colleges they have? And it's a big book.
It's pretty amazing. So we'll look forward to sharing more information about that. But the possibilities are there, and that's a very exciting thing to know, really and truly for all abilities.
No, and I was in Chicago last week, and I was talking to a parent about a situation where it's like a community college situation, but you can go and live in dorm, and they work on independent living skills.
Yes.
And really like doing community skills. Like, but it's a college setting.
Yes.
But it keeps them safe.
Yes.
But they're not doing the academics, but they're just doing like all the independent learning and living, and they're on the campus.
Yeah.
And there's a whole situation where it's really guided toward that aspect.
Are we talking about Minnesota Life College?
No.
Oh, so there's another one. Okay, well, we have to find out about that later. But I want to try to squeeze in one more question. We have 3 minutes left. At what point can we pull ABA off a young adult with high-functioning autism?
Okay, so ABA was never designed to be lifelong, but there are kids where parents will swear up and down, this is the way they learn. And if it's the most effective way they learn, the skill just changes. So I have a child who, we have a whole business started for him, a micro enterprise, but she swears DTT is still the way he learns best and the quickest. You know, and but it's just that the skills now are all based on his job.
Okay.
So how to greet people, how to like take a credit card and swipe it, you know, all of that. And she swears up and down he's still learning, and he is, because he's learning how to do all the skills he needs. It's just that the targets have changed.
Okay.
So there are ABA people, and the thing is, you will have funding sources that say ABA wasn't meant to be lifelong, and I agree, it wasn't meant to be lifelong. It was meant to teach them what they need to know and to move on. But this is also an adult who is not fluent with vocal language. He uses a device to communicate mostly, and in reality, he will never be by himself in public.
Okay.
But
for this family, they're saying high functioning.
So if he's high functioning, it's all about teaching him independence then. Okay. And he shouldn't be sitting, if he's high functioning, it shouldn't look like the table learning anymore. It should really be the natural environment.
Okay.
Teaching him how to understand the cues in the environment, what will lead him to independence so he can learn on his own. And it is the goal. If you're high functioning, you should be learning all the cues that will teach you how to be independent in every way, whether it's with schooling or with work or just apartment living, you know, how independent living skills. Then you should be fading off to see how independent they can be. It might go to where they can live, you know, I have one that lives in a dorm on his own and everything, but we have someone go in and check once a week, or like we'll just go do you know, like, oh, we realize when he walks across campus, he says hi to no one because he's so focused on getting where he's going.
Right.
And he knows how to say hi, but it doesn't help socially.
Right.
So when we do the 1 time a week drop-in, we realize, oh, so there's no per se problem.
Right.
But we're there to see like, oh, did you know that
bump it
you're
up a little
ignoring
bit.
everybody?
Right.
So, but to teach them to be independent. So if they're high functioning, you're teaching them all the skills for them to recognize on their own that will help them have a more productive life in every way.
But I'm of the Martha Herbert school of thought that when the kids say I'm done, then that starts the timer quick ticking of you need to finish up.
Yeah.
Do you subscribe to that as well?
Not always, because sometimes it depends whether their reality is in check or not.
Okay.
Because we have kids who refuse to get any help from their ABA person, even though they still need help, and even though it's not even in an ABA setting. It's just like, hey, I'm going to teach you, you know, the new term is adulting.
Right.
That typical people are using.
Right.
And we're like, no, we're going to teach you how to do a budget. And since we know that we can teach discreetly how to do a budget,
right,
the parents will be like, can you come in and just do this for us? and the kid's refusing it completely.
Yeah.
But the parents have already tried to do it on their own naturally, and
Yeah.
the kid still refuses. And even though we're telling them this will help you be independent, you'll never be independent with money if you don't know how to do this, they're completely refusing any help.
Well, what I'm thinking of is that I remember a moment when Jem looked at Sienna Greener Wooten, Dr. Wooten, and said to her, I don't want to do this anymore. And she, without missing a beat, said, that's great, Jem. Here are the 5 things that you need to be able to
Exactly.
do. And the minute that you can do these 5 things, we're done. And he was like, really? That's all I have to do is those 5 things? Oh, if you just told me that, I would have done that weeks
No,
ago.
and
then he proceeded to do that, and they closed the book and went, you're done.
And that's what we do with the kids who are younger. Like
Yeah.
when they're younger and they're saying like, I don't want to be here, we're like, okay, if you can actually create a task list.
There you go.
Because sometimes the kids are far.
But older kids, that's not so cut and dried.
Yeah, elder kids, sometimes the reality is it's not a problem, but here are still your goals, but they still don't know how to meet those goals.
Got it.
And so it's those kids who are inflexible and who think help is just bad overall.
Right.
They don't realize, no, asking for help is being proactive to avoid certain situations. So with those kids, it's different. With the younger kids who have been in ABA from when they're 3 or 4,
Yeah.
and they ask, like, we want to be done, and we set them goals.
Yeah.
We're like, here are the goals, and we help them keep track.
Yes.
Like, you want to be out of here. Okay, you achieved this one. There's still these 3. You're halfway done on here.
Yeah.
We just need the other half. And for them, the concreteness is very helpful. And for those kids, definitely. If you
Okay.
want to be done with this, it's fine. It's not a problem. We're going to get you here, and we're going to celebrate that you got here.
Okay. We're out of time. I don't know where the hour went, but I thank you so much. It's always a treat to have you here. We so appreciate you, and thank you for taking the time to do that.
You're very welcome.